Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Education Committee meeting. Today is, November 30th. It is about 2 minutes after 6, and we're in the Cardinal Room. So we have a number of things to discuss today. First, we have, do we have any announcements or communications?
Yes, we do. I would just like to share a message to our community about some recent events. As members of our community may be aware, last week the district was served notice of complaints filed with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Committee and the United States Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. The complaints present issues of concern that can be roughly grouped into three areas: student placement in classes, identification for gifted education, and student discipline. These are areas identified for improvement by the district, and we have been addressing each over the past several years. However, since informally receiving the complaints last Monday, the district has commenced on a thorough and comprehensive review of our own records and documentation so that we can objectively assess and respond to the issues raised in the complaints. It is important to note that the elimination of the third track requested in the complaints has been a priority item discussed by the district for months during both Board of Education and committee meetings, and most recently during a community forum hosted in this building on November 5th. Professional development, appropriate supports, and planning are needed to ensure the success of this transition, and our teachers and administrators are equally committed to it. The school board is committed to this restructuring as well and will be voting on it at the December 14th legislative meeting. This has been the announced plan since last year. In addressing the complaints, it is our intention to look at data retrospectively and longitudinally as part of our assessment. We therefore request patience from the community as we take the time and effort to respond to these complaints with the level of seriousness that is warranted. The school district's mission is to provide a safe, supportive environment for all students to become lifelong learners and contributing members of a changing society. To this end, the district is fully committed to providing excellence and equity in education to all students. Our vision explicitly states that commitment. All students can and will learn through equitable opportunities. Thank you, Dr. Ludwig.
Thank you. The first order of business is to look at a number of items that we will decide if we're going to recommend to move forward to the legislative meeting. It's on the attachment. The first one is about student activities. The first item is an middle school German exchange program with the students from Germany coming to Sandy Run from November 18th until tomorrow. I believe that would be when they're leaving. And the students from Sandy Run going in May to Germany. Is there anything else to discuss about that? Any questions?
There was one thing that came up at the policy meeting. Policy 121.1 is programs involving district students occurring outside the United States. Part of that policy will be a motion to have the discretion of the superintendent to cancel it if there's any pending issues, in particular concerns over the safety of the students.
Okay, and that will be brought for what, first reading?
First reading at the legislative meeting in December.
All right, so it will actually, we will have the opportunity at least to approve it before the second part of this trip takes place. Okay. Is there anything else? Nothing else about this? Any other issues or questions? Then we'll recommend moving that one forward. The second student activity is, it is recommended that Upper Dublin Elementary and Middle School students be granted permission to travel to the PMEA District 11 Strings Festival at Perkiomen Valley Middle School in February. Any questions or issues about that? If there aren't any, I think we'll recommend that be moved forward also. The next one is regarding software. IXL Learning Software ELA site license for grades 6 to 8. Is there anything, Phil, do you want to say anything about that, or is it pretty self-explanatory? Or Ava?
I think it'd be more appropriate for Ava to
Oh, I'm
speak to it. From my perspective, it's all good on the Chromebook, so.
We've been piloting IXL. We began last year in 8th grade in English, and the teachers find this a very positive way to promote automaticity with grammar practice. And through Sandy Run's initiative, they spread that to 6th and 7th grade. So we will be looking very closely at it this spring and then in the coming fall. In addition, there is a free site license for us to try IXL in terms of mathematics. IXL gives teachers the opportunity to push out practice according to standards and student area of need. And so far, we've heard quite a number of positive things, but we'll need to track the success and to see how, if it's encouraging student achievement, and we'll be able to do that probably next fall, just to give everyone an opportunity to really use it this spring first.
Will you be looking separately at the ELA and math components?
So we'll be specifically looking at ELA as a math pilot. I think we can garner some feedback, but it's awfully hard to come to a full conclusion with just a few months of the pilot.
And if we like this, is it $7,600 every year?
Currently, for 6th to 8th grade English language arts, it's $7,600 through next December. I can't comment on what the price range would be the
Okay.
following year.
Well, I think it would be helpful to know if is there a discount for a multi-year? Sometimes these things are priced differently for a longer-term contract.
No, we'll absolutely find out about that. Also, prices sometimes drop, sometimes they go up. It's just hard to predict,
Yeah.
I think, depending on the widespread usage of IXL in general.
I guess the root of my question is: we're looking at a one-year trial, and then if we like it, it's a multi-year thing, or is it a year-by-year decision, or what's the longer-term strategy?
Yeah, I think those are excellent questions, and I think that we would make a determination through the curriculum summit, either this spring or the following fall.
Okay.
Just
thanks.
to be aware of all the potential ways that we can partner with IXL. I guess I would add that they have very generously wanted us, of course, to try their product, and so we've been using their product at no cost for quite a while. So I think it's negotiable.
Any other questions or comments? So I think that sounds like something that would be very useful for the ELA program. I don't know if there's any influence on what's going on in the ELA review, or
There might be in the sense that
Mike.
there may be some consideration for the ELA language arts component. I think we're looking to figure out how blended learning opportunities augment the program. I believe in grades 7 through 12, we will end up in a process where we'll continue to write and refine the units of study that have been written. So a tech-enhanced support for some basic skills would probably be helpful. So if this is a tool that could help that, we would certainly consider it as part of the review.
okay, thanks. Given that, I think we should recommend this be moved on.
Have you seen this in use by other districts? And is the intent that they can use this at home as remediation or
Yeah, so
reinforcement?
it is being pushed out. Students can do it as homework. It interfaces really nicely with Google. So, for example, a student can submit a paper, and a teacher can see a grammar issue. and can actually link right into the document to IXL practice that will give the teacher feedback to show the teacher how the student is doing. So there's so many ways I think that we can begin to explore using IXL in terms of having students get that automated response to grammar in the same way we look for automated response with mathematics.
Okay, and have you seen it in use in other districts?
I have not.
Okay. Okay, so, and then what will happen with this, Mr. V? One day they'll open up their Chromebooks and the app will just be there. Is that correct?
It's
You'll
not
push
an
it out?
application, it's software, it's a site, and so students go there, but teachers can link directly. I'm going to pass it over to our Google. I did try that.
Sure. No, it's a hosted application. So a lot like an online database might be, right? This is a hosted web-based application for which we pay a license. Imagine Learning works the same way.
Okay.
Read 180 works the same way.
That's it? Okay. Moving on to the next item is the board will consider approving the restructuring of grade 9 in 2016-17 and grade 10 in 2017-18. And I'll read the background because it includes the background and what's going to be part of the motion. Beginning in 2005, the district has moved toward heterogeneous grouping. Initially in the K-5 mathematics program, followed by elimination of the lowest level, which is track 4, English, mathematics, science, and social studies courses at the high school, and then elimination of multi-level courses in science, social studies, and English language arts for grades 6 to 8. This motion proposes the reduction to 2 levels, academic and honors, for 9th grade biology, social studies, and English for the 2016-17 school year, and 10th grade environmental science, social studies, and English for the 2017-18 school year.
May I just add, there have been some questions about the budgetary implications, and at this point, I can share with the board that I anticipate including in the draft budget a request to add 2 teaching FTEs at the high school. We budgeted that at master's step 3, and given that the amount involved would be just about $192,000, a bit below that. In addition, we're going to be, as we have students go through course selection, we're going to be looking at the assignments of our paraprofessionals, our educational aides and teaching aides here at the high school. In addition, the teachers who would have been teaching level 3 courses, we will be looking at what the assignments will be as we move forward. So the overall look right now at the budgetary implications is about $192,000, and we will continue as enrollments incur, as students sign up for classes, and as we see how many 8th graders actually move to the 9th grade, we'll be determining if there are any other implications, but that's what I'm anticipating putting in the draft budget right now.
Okay, Dr. Ludwig, I want to take a break from the discussion and just read a statement from the board president. There was a recent statement in a news article alleging that restructuring at Upper Dublin High School was postponed due to pushback from our teachers. Knowing how committed Upper Dublin High School teachers and staff are to employing best practices in everything they do, I would like to clarify the feedback received by our administrators from our teachers as the restructuring proposal was being developed during the past school year. When teachers were surveyed about the proposal, they indicated that they felt the need for additional professional learning in the area of differentiated instruction practice, and the administration agreed, extending this training to include formative assessment and flexible grouping practices. These areas form the basis of much of our professional development through the 2014-15 and 2015-16 school years. This additional preparation caused the administration to delay the recommendation to the board for implementation until 2016-20 2017 school year. Without a doubt, Upper Dublin's high school teachers and administrators are equally committed to the success of this important initiative and believe that a careful, planned approach will ensure its success. The school board is committed to this restructuring as well, and we'll be voting on it at the December 14th legislative meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levinowitz. Are there comments or questions from the committee or other board members?
Can someone tell me currently, this current year, how many classes we have of level 3 and the numbers? I know it's going to be different next year. We don't know what it's going to be. But just this year.
Mrs. Morrison?
I can look it up, but you'll have to give me a moment to do so.
Okay. Okay. We indicated that it would take 2 full-time FTEs
That is what we are
Teachers.
anticipating at this point.
and perhaps some additional educational assistance.
Or taking a look at the assignments of the folks. We can't lose sight of the fact that if we reduce level 3, we have people who were assigned to teach and support in those classes, and we will be able to reallocate those folks and use them in different ways. So we need to see what the course selection is, will be a primary driver of that.
Okay.
But that's what we're anticipating right now, because we want to provide, we're going to be providing more co-teaching, and we want to provide supports for teachers as they are moving forward with more differentiated instruction.
In the level 3 classes, when you look at the level 3, do the students from the Villa, are many of them in the track 3?
I can't comment. I don't have the statistics. I do have the numbers you asked me for. Currently, well, this was as of November 4th. We had 108. As of November 4th, we had 21 students enrolled in Track 3 English, 154 in Track 2, and 185 in Track 1. In Social Studies, we had 27 students. In the lowest level, 186. In Level 2, 165 in Honors. Mathematics, we had 70 in Level 3, 118 in Level 2. And then in Science, we have 28 students, Level 3, 244, Level 2, and 109, Level 1. This was part of the presentation that Dr. Wheeler, Mr. Schultz, and I made to the board. And I believe it was also presented at the community forum.
Okay, so the numbers real 21 in language arts, 27 in social studies, and 28 in science. Those are numbers we're looking at. And currently,
27 in math,
No,
21 in English.
27.
There's 70 in mathematics, however, there is no move to
Mathematics is not-
restructure mathematics.
Yeah, we're not looking at math. That's why I skipped that one. Okay.
We're not looking, I believe, not looking at math this year because math has more issues in terms of reducing the number of levels.
We currently, in our thinking at the middle school level, we have one level of social studies, one level of English, and one level of science. However, we do have 2 levels of mathematics, and so the idea that students are moving from 8th grade with just 1 level to 2 levels makes a lot of sense. Students in mathematics, however, are moving from 2 levels and then into 3 levels.
I apologize to my colleagues. Questions, I don't know if I overstepped, if there were questions from the committees. Let me turn it over back to the committee to discuss this. Sorry.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? I think there has been a lot of discussion over the last 6 months about this issue, and I mean, it is my feeling from everything I have observed, including observing classes in the high school, discussing the plans, and hearing about how the professional development is going, that it seems to me that we have done a good job in preparation for this change, and I would recommend that we move it forward for the December 14th legislative meeting.
Thank you.
Can we also, another question, just to remind us and the community, I don't know if tonight or maybe next week, or 2 weeks, I should say, legislative, but just an overview of all the professional development that's been occurring to support this initiative. I know we talk about it, at each meeting, but I don't know if we've seen a picture of, from last year, the types of professional development that has occurred, what we're planning for the remainder of this year, which is a significant period of time, and I would assume there's items planned for the summer, for next summer, perhaps, also, that we're going to be doing some professional development or some maybe curriculum writing or something to help support this initiative. So I think at one time it would be good to have that presentation. So, because it's not just the 2 FTEs, it's all the professional development that we've been doing significantly over the past 2 years, if not longer.
As well as curriculum design, which helps us with
Right.
curriculum clarity. So there's a lot that's going into this.
Yeah, and the Chromebook initiative, too, was putting the delay this year was to get those Chromebooks out and to get them, being used. And I would be curious, too, to see if Mr. V has been in any of the Track 3 classes to see what kind of use is being done, at this time with the Chromebooks. And are they supporting, additional exercises in terms of, taking the Chromebooks home, working on some additional review, and that, or is it basically you see no difference across all the tracks with the use of the Chromebooks?
I think it's a great question and discussion to have with our faculty and our faculty who teach a range of students. Certainly the narrative I hear from faculty, and this is all faculty, all grade levels, I hear a great deal of the positives that are coming out. And specifically this year, we really focused on all of that staff development with respect to differentiated instruction and formative assessment. None of that was sacrificed for the Chromebook initiative. And in fact, all of the technology staff development happened through that lens. And so one reinforced the other. And so it's been fabulous to see how that's been coming to fruition over the course of the year. But sort of getting down and into the weeds, so the best spokespeople for that would be our faculty.
Great. Okay.
I just want, because maybe I misunderstood. Are we going from 2 levels of math in the middle school to 3 levels of math at the high school?
That is our current situation. We have 2 levels of mathematics. When students move from 5th to 6th grade, they go from 1 level to 2 levels, with the exception of students who are accelerated. And when students move from 8th to 9th grade, we're going from 2 levels to 3 levels.
So there's no proposed change for math for next year.
For next year, that's correct.
Or for the year after?
We have not begun discussing tracking in mathematics either between 5th and 6th grade in any depth. And I think right now the focus is on a successful transition and restructure in the area of science, social studies, and English. Certainly mathematics is something that might be discussed once we have the restructuring in place.
And the motion specifically proposes reduction to 2 levels for 9th grade English, social studies and English, and for, in the following year, adding 10th grade environmental science, social studies, and English.
We also have implemented a brand new mathematics program, 6th to 9th grade. It's a very different approach to teaching mathematics, and I think part of the thinking is to have teachers get to a high level of comfortability, if that's a word, with the new program, and to determine the efficacy of the new program, because it certainly does approach mathematics at a much deeper, more foundational level for all students.
I think Ms. Brister, sorry, Ms. Hester. I just dreamed that you were back up here, Anita. Wow. Yeah, identical. It's a good point in terms of, I know Mr. Schultz was, we have to look and see what we're doing for those 70 kids in track 3 math. We know what our scores are when they take the Keystone in math at the high school. So I'm hoping that on a parallel direction, we're also looking to see what supports we're providing in Algebra 1 at the high school, how we can improve. We got to get more of those young men and women in the advanced and proficient level.
We certainly do.
Yeah.
No argument there. And this is part of, as we're analyzing the data, and there will be a presentation December 14th, this is what we're looking at there as well, curriculum, et cetera. But we definitely realize that that is another area of concern.
Are we looking at increasing the amount of rigor in the 9th grade algebra class?
In our 9th grade algebra, both level 3 and level 2, we're using a new program called Carnegie, and that is a much more rigorous program, and it's very foundational. We've had it in place for 1 year, and I have to say, and I've said this before, when you put a new program into place, there's often what's called a dimplementation. We didn't see that, so that's actually positive. So our scores didn't drop even though it was a brand new program, and that's new for everyone, and teachers are getting used to it and working really, really diligently to make sure that they understand the mechanics of the program. We also are taking a look at, there are different lenses we evaluate programs through. One of them is organizational. One of the things we started looking at is the number of minutes we have available to teach mathematics at the middle school. Something that I think we need to look at, and I believe we probably need more time, particularly in 6th grade as students transition to teach mathematics. Mathematics is also sequential, and so we've implemented a new elementary program that is also very foundational and rigorous. And I believe that over time we're going to see that increase in score. But what I can assure you is that the teachers at the high school who are currently teaching the Carnegie 9th grade course are teaching it to the Keystone standards, and they are working very, very diligently with students to make sure that they are prepared for that very challenging test.
Any other comments or questions from anyone on the board? Okay, the last item of our motions that we're reviewing is there are 2 conferences that are in the handout materials. Does anybody have any questions about those? It looks like one is already a late submission, but that it's a reasonable conference.
I think we can demonstrate that these conferences, which address supporting behaviors in our students who are struggling in that area, I think this is more documentation of our efforts to address student behaviors and ultimately student discipline. So thank you to the board for approving these, even one a little bit in arrears.
If there's nothing else on any of the items, the motions, I did neglect to discuss the minutes. I guess we have minutes have been distributed from the November 2nd meeting, our meeting last month, so that if anyone has any comments or corrections, please get them to Brooke.
Dr. Ludwig, I did have something, I'm sorry, on the, back to the Upper Dublin Strings Fest. I just wanted to, regarding policy, we passed a regulation in November 231. We did that. One of the things that we talked about in the new regulation is we talked about the funding. And I think we need to take a look at, in reviewing how it's being funded, The regulation states that we are funding competitions, and I think that's what probably this falls under, that the district, per our regulation, states that we fund the ground transportation, the fees associated with any of the staff chaperones that are attending. But it doesn't lay out that we will be funding any of the costs of the actual competition. So I don't know what we want to do with that, but I just wanted to make the committee aware, pursuant to the regulation, that those costs should be placed on the students, unless, of course, there's a hardship need.
It's my understanding that this is not actually a competition. It's more of a festival that students will participate in, but we certainly will get specific information, Mrs. Rothman, for the December 14th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
That's good. Is that a change in regulations or policy, or is that what you're just letting us know what it currently is?
It was a change. We just approved it in November. Part of the policy was to make sure that we're being consistent amongst all of the different competitions that we see. And so that's why I think that specific wording is in the regulation now. So if that's not something, of course, we want to do, that we can always make those changes. It's just that that was kind of the structure that we tried to create. So what, 'cause we see so many of these to get approved, so we just want to be consistent. So what, as long as
Are you saying this one is not consistent with our policy or our regs?
Well, it depends on what the Strings Fest is, I guess.
And we will get confirming information
so
for you. I've made note of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else regarding any of the motions?
Thank you. How will the district assess the success of the program? How will we look at it in the year that we initiated and in the subsequent years? How will we're going to be successful.
Yes.
How will we show that?
We believe that through student grades, through scores on standardized tests. That's a very simple, quick answer. Mrs. Morrison, do you have any other thoughts to add to that?
So the best measure that's in place and the most standardized measure are the results of our Keystone exams. I think that's the most standardized external measure we can use. Additionally, we have been working very hard to have common assessments across grade levels. And so I think that particularly this spring, it would be a good idea to capture some of that data. So how are students doing on these common assessments so that we can measure students who are taking an assessment, which could be a written exam or it could be a project or a paper, and how are they doing from one year to the next. So that's another way we can measure internally whether students are achieving at the appropriate levels of rigor that we expect from them. Additionally, we are looking at some nationally normed growth measures. However, we currently have classroom diagnostic tools in place, which is a service provided to us through the Pennsylvania Department of Education that measures students' growth according to the PA core standards. And we're not entirely sure yet how well that classroom diagnostic tool actually measures student growth, and we're looking at it very closely currently. I think if we find that the CDT assessment doesn't fit our needs to show student growth, then we might have to look for a more comprehensive nationally normed measure. So there are many districts out there who use measures like that. It's always a question of balance, though, because we also don't want to over-test students.
I know when we moved from 4 to 3 tracks, the board did get updated. I don't know if it was quarterly or twice a year on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats as we move through that. Can we have that again? I don't know what administrator would take the lead on that, but we had somebody report to the board on, I'll say, a regular basis in terms of how it was going.
I think that would be a very positive step. I do want to add the caveat, however, that in the transition, that is in the fall of next year, as people are just getting comfortable, I would recommend not capturing data yet and giving teachers and students the opportunity during the first
sure.
semester.
I think it was a good period of
to
time
get-
before Mr. Parkin presented any data or any formal or informal observations of how it was going.
But I do think that once we've lived into it, then we should begin capturing some of the data I mentioned and certainly make a report about that.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
To Dr. Resnick's question, I also think important, obviously, student data and achievement data and how they're doing. But I also think that there's a big piece of this that has to do with observable learning and accountability for staff regarding the strategies and the teaching that we've talked about with differentiation, flexible grouping, and all the different things over the last year and a half, moving forward even further. We have to make sure that those things are being implemented with fidelity and done well. So I think there's an accountability through visible learning of the teachers with all of the professional development that they're getting.
Is observation on differentiated instruction part of teacher evaluation?
You want to?
We use the Danielson framework as our observation protocol, and differentiation is visible throughout that, and it's very much it is an opportunity for teachers to see their teaching through someone else's eyes, and then it's an opportunity for teachers to think about areas of growth and areas that need improvement. We are thinking about systemic ways to, particularly for us to capture as differentiated instruction, really taking root. So we've begun some conversations around, well, how can we do some walkthroughs to evaluate from a programmatic standpoint how differentiation is impacting our instruction, and to give some narrative feedback to groups of teachers to say, here's some really great things we're seeing in terms of differentiation. So I think that'll be part of some next steps.
So what you're talking about is walkthroughs more in the line of, is that Elmore, or who's the book that you had people read?
Instructional Rounds, Richard Elmore. Yes, that does talk about using walkthroughs to gather information about the systems. It's not evaluative of teachers, but it's to gather information about how we as a district, in whatever microcosm we want to identify, if it's a particular building, if it's an entire school district, just as an example, we might want to look at our questioning techniques. How are we using questioning in classrooms to probe into student understanding? So through a walkthrough protocol, we would go into various classrooms, and teachers should be involved in walkthrough as well. It shouldn't just be administrators. It's really just going in and you're not even attending to whose classroom you're in as much as you are looking at what techniques are being used, and then the follow-up conversation is to take a look across the system, how is a particular practice being used. So yes, that certainly is something that can be very valuable.
Is that something that you would all consider doing as we evaluate the effectiveness of our restructuring?
Yes, and we are actually.
Okay.
That, I believe, did we keep that on the IPD agenda? That actually is a topic that's going to be discussed at IPD tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow?
Well, it was discussed last month, and
When I was away, yes.
and I think we're tabling it for this month, but bringing it back in January.
Bringing it back in
Just-
January,
we
yes.
wanna
So that
make
is,
sure- We want to make sure that it's a slow process, and by slow I mean a good, well thought out, thorough all stakeholders involved have the opportunity to discuss so that when we do begin, it's very successful in terms of capturing a programmatic look at how our differentiated instruction and whatever else we may determine is working in the district.
Right. And again, it's not about people, it's about systems.
Okay.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, the next item on our agenda is to hear from Mr. Vinogradov about digital access to support the elementary programs.
To boot this up. Wonderful. So at the Education Committee last meeting, Finance Committee last meeting, we were doing some preliminary budgeting for the technology department, looking at elements that were coming back, looking at our refresh cycle that was suspended for this year, and the topic of what are we doing to provide expanded access at the elementary levels came up. Dr. Levinowitz asked if we would give a brief update with respect to sort of our pedagogical goals for expanded access in the elementary, at the elementary level. So I want to start first by giving a context for what we have now, right? So what we have right now is we have robust programs that we invest in, that we want our students to be able to use across ELA and math. And we have a challenge in doing that. So I'm just showcasing a few. RAS Kids, Differentiated Reading and Comprehension, Imagine Learning for Language and Literacy, Zern for Adaptive Math Support and Enrichment. We have a great deal of interest and effort by our teachers to use Google Classroom to support research, collaboration, feedback, and support. And a developing digital citizenship and digital literacy, safety and responsibility curriculum at the elementary level. But right now, using any of those programs is a real challenge. We recently completed our Bright Bites Clarity Survey, and that data will be coming back. And that was done, it's a technology survey where you ask teachers and students the question about how are you using the technology. And one of the questions had to do with access. And a young sixth grader who was taking the survey looked at, the 4 choices with respect to asking about the challenge of digital access, and the kid said, none of those apply anymore. The barrier to access had been removed. We still have a real problem in our elementary with respect to accessing these programs, and I'm looking at nodding heads here of our elementary principals. Our elementary students, we have some Chromebooks for them. For the most part, they've inherited a lot of hand-me-down laptops. We've breathed as much life as we can into those devices, but they're problematic for the younger grades. So at the same time, we don't want more technology than we need. And that's developmentally, you have this huge range across K4. So our plans for grade 2 through 4 is to create a shared classroom set of Chromebooks to have that 1-to-2 ratio, so one device for every 2 students. And so this is enough for, if I am a 4th grade, 3rd grade teacher and I have to coordinate to get that one card or that one lab with all of my colleagues in my grade level, that's a challenge. But if I'm just coordinating with one colleague across the hall, then I have a lot of flexibility. I can take half the set, use them for flexible groupings throughout the day, or I might be doing a big project, so I'm going to take them for one day and you'll take them for the next day. And so when I've had that discussion with elementary teachers, this is a comfortable middle ground. I would just love to have my own class set, not have to worry, not have to collaborate or coordinate with anybody, but that's not necessarily practical either from a pedagogical standpoint or from a fiscal standpoint. We would be buying more technology than we need. So that 2-to-1 is that balance in removing our barrier to access. The kids, and Dr. Lewinowitz also alluded to this when he was taking a tour during American Education Week, to walk into that 3rd grade classroom, they handle the Chromebook like they've always been using it. This is not the case with that old PC laptop that, it needs this update now, we have to call in TMS, we have to, right, et cetera, et cetera. So those become real barriers maintaining that older equipment. For K through 1, right now we've started this very nascent pilot over at Fort Washington. And so in this space, we have some of those applications you saw up there earlier, Imagine Learning, RAS Kids. And in this space, we're doing an exploration. What happens when I have a set of tablets that I can use for small group differentiation, support, or enrichment? And what it will likely look like is a set for a grade level, right? So that gives me a lot of flexibility. I can have 5 tablets in my room. I can set them up for small station work when I need to. If I want to coordinate a special event where we're all using that tablet, I can easily coordinate that with my colleagues, since that kind of thing would not happen that frequently. A lot of neighboring districts in the region that have gone one-to-one, they've invested in iPads or Google tablets. Every kid has a dedicated device, grades K through going on. In hindsight, they realized they bought too much technology. For the most part, that kid is much more happy and learning a lot more when they are away from the tech, using their hands, reading, tactile. There's so much that happens in that developmental space. And if they could do it again, they would have bought less technology. So we are learning from that example to say, what do we need? What is valuable? And we have this balance where we buy enough technology to meet those needs developmentally and programmatically, removing the barriers to access. The cost projections are very fluid right now as we begin to this early evaluation, but this came up during the last meeting. So we'd be looking at a lease level of $33,000 a year, right? So it's a very small fraction of the budget for that grades 2 through 4 Chromebooks. Tablets, it's hard to lease tablets. So that would be a one-time investment. If we did a set per grade level, we'd be looking at about a $40,000 to $50,000 investment, and then a few thousand every year recurring, just to deal with damage after that. So questions?
Would the tablets would be a Google Chrome-based tablet so that it's compatible with everything else we're doing?
Yep, so we would be doing Android tablets. The nice piece about Chromebooks and Android tablets is that we do not have to increase our staff in terms of service and maintenance or management of those devices. We also would not have to invest in additional mobile device management software or servers. And so that's all built in and bundled and easy enough for me to do from anywhere in the world.
Are we finding that the laptops and other computers that we have, which maybe could be called legacy now, are really too slow, too hard to use, or do they still have a use even if we get this new technology?
Now, some of them are relatively new, and they're great devices. And so we will definitely, in all the numbers that I ran by during Finance Committee, all account for us getting every bit of life that we can out of the devices that we have. There are definitely some pedagogical impacts, right? So I would want to have those more robust PC laptops that are operational distributed where they have the greatest impact, and that might be middle school, that might be fourth grade for some elaborate projects. These Chromebooks, they boot in 8 seconds, right? The kid is on and they're working. When you're dealing with 8-year-olds and you're trying to do a quick Zern lesson, and I send 8 of them over, get on your Chromebook and go, that's fantastic for them to be able to just log in and they're off, and there's not this 10, 15 minutes while they're waiting for that machine to log in.
Questions?
I just want to make sure I understand. So the current ratio K through 4 is about 5 to 1 or 1 to 5, depending on your.
One device for every 5,
Yep.
about every 5 children.
And so we're looking at
That's for grades 2 through 4.
Okay.
2 through 4, currently in grades 2 through 4, we have one device for every 5. We've excluded K and 1 from that.
We have effectively 0 in K and 1 now.
Unless they rob from their big brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Okay.
1 to 12. I mean, you're looking at, you have 2 desktops in the classroom.
Okay, right.
Right.
Yeah.
The faculty's Chromebook, if they want to try to use that too in the mix. Yeah.
So either way, it's still an increase in availability, a significant increase in K and 1, and a slight increase 2 through 4.
Right.
Okay.
This, the new ratios are for the new equipment. There is that accounting what we already have.
No, that includes, that new ratio would include what we already have.
Oh, all right.
With retiring our legacy equipment. So in the mix right now, we have legacy equipment where the cost of breathing new life into the device, replacing its battery, et cetera, I could buy a Chromebook.
Okay.
A question on the lease. So the $33,000 for the grades 2 to 4, unlike the previous Chromebook initiative, is really just leasing from the district, and so there's no return.
No, yeah,
costs.
those devices stay at school.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My follow-up question to that would just be for the K-1 initiative. You talked about having too much technology. Has there been kind of some of the research in regards to introducing technology at too early of an age as well, in terms of?
Sure. So Ava, you shared that link. Do you want to? Yeah, you want to chime in?
Yeah. So the National Association.
You got to speak right into the mic.
Thank you for reminding me. It's a problem I seem to be having. The National Association for Education of Young Children, which is the national accrediting body that does very effective research on learning for young children, has taken a pro stance for the use of technology. They believe that when used appropriately, it can increase a young child's learning. But I do think that there are parameters that we're relatively familiar with and we would love to share with anybody in the community if they're interested. But it used to be for a long time that NACI, that organization, was against any kind of screens. But they've changed their minds because I think they're seeing how technology can change learning for students even at a young age.
And I think, as you dive into that research, it's very judicious and specific use of technology, right? So we're, and this is why tablets come into the mix there, right? Because it's very tactile. There's a lot of feedback, audio feedback. As a kid holds a letter, for example, and begins to slide, and the letter makes a sound. And as they slide it into place in a word, the sound can change, right? This is one of the most frustrating things in the world for kids. Like, why? Right? Why does this letter make 2 different sounds in different contexts, right? So it's a great, that kind of reinforcement and practice as they build and shape. That's something that I couldn't do with the block letters, right? So it's always about, why would I use this tool? I don't want to use it as a substitute for something that I can do analog. What does it give me that I didn't have before? And this is where it becomes very judicious. And that's why starting at this very modest level gives us that space and that access. this initial proposal will be informed by the pilot, because as we do the pilot, we'll learn if it requires a great deal of staff development for this to be really valuable, then maybe we'll slow down, right? Because there's, again, we don't want to buy technology that would sit and not get used. I can't say that about the Chromebooks, right? In every context, they're being used all the time. That's great. But if it would require that level of staff development, then perhaps we'll go slower. So that process is being informed right now.
In addition to the hardware, is there going to be expenses for the 4 elementary schools in terms of expanding network access?
Yep. So that's a piece that we're working on right now, especially to take advantage of the new E-rate and that 40% reimbursement on everything that connects me from the internet to my device, right? That entire pipeline is eligible. So we're taking advantage of the necessary upgrades that we would have had to make anyway. And we deferred from last year to this year a lot of those, specifically to take advantage of the E-rate opportunity. So we will be making updates to our wireless infrastructure at all of our elementaries, concurrent with our need to replace our gateway switches, which are reaching end of life this summer.
Mrs. Morrison, did you find the link for that?
We have it right here,
Okay.
and among the recommendations, it is really about not having passive use of technology, that the implementation of technology for young children allows them to explore and to learn, and that they're not just sitting and watching television, which is the change that we've seen in technology over the last 25 years.
Is that a link you can give out?
It's in the FAQ for parents on our Chromebook
all right.
link,
So can it-
but we
can-
can make that more prominent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
To clarify, if the pilot, you'll be able to make a determination with the tablets for next year. If
Yeah.
you're gonna, and that would be, the budget is being done now.
So over the next couple of months, that
Next
will
couple of
become
months.
more clear, right?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Phil, have you considered expanding the Chrome purchase program to the lower grades in the elementary school?
I've had a lot of requests for it. It's certainly, I believe in making a decision as a community. And so it'd have to be a community decision and arriving at that. So the question here is about, families paying that fee, being able to bring the device home. And again, I think it comes back to that balance of too much tech, enough tech, removing that barrier to access. So, and I live it, right, with my daughter in 4th grade right now. So my daughter comes home. She uses an old computer that we have to do a lot of her Zerning. She works on collaborative research in Google Slides with some of her classmates on a history research project, and it is awesome. And I'm lucky. I have an old computer to give her. And not everybody has that. And so here's this managed device, filtered, right? So I hear that, and yet we want to meet that need. It's this very nebulous space. Are all teachers going to be doing that? How often is my daughter doing that? If I think about her whole homework paradigm, once, twice a week, that she needs to be in that space, right? The rest is this wonderful Eureka program that my wife and I that's amazing. We can't help her anymore with her math. I can help my son, right, with his geometry just fine. I cannot help my daughter with her Eureka. She's, a lot of her work is not digital. And is that driven by teacher familiarity with resources, or is it driven by great pedagogy, developmentally appropriate for her, or some mix of the two? I think we're in this nebulous space. I don't think it hurts us to start this way, to say, at school, we can remove the barrier to regularly using our programs and let that growth happen there. So now our students can be in that space at school as they need to be. And if that demand comes, like, yes, we really would like to be able to bring devices home. I have a lot of parents who are holding off on getting their fourth grader a device this year because they know next year is coming. So it's good to have that problem. It's good to have that tension. I think, but we need to make that decision as a community.
Can I just add to that as a reminder, although it seems like we've been doing this forever, we're now only 3 months into this Chromebook initiative, and we're still learning and figuring it out. And I think it's too early. We don't know yet. It's too early to jump into big changes like expanding it to other grades. I think it's certainly something we can consider as time goes by, but we're still getting our feet wet here. We still have a lot of learning to do before we make any changes.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that this proposal gives us that modest, let's remove the barrier and build that capacity, and have a year of experience under our feet before we take that next step.
And I totally understand that. I just think of my son comes home with Zern homework, and so he has to have a device at home, right? And so parents have to purchase those in some degree, or their son or daughter's not doing homework at home. And we're seeing, and I'm very excited about, we're seeing some more of the flipped classrooms and things like that in the lower elementary school grades. I have a second grader. And so I'm just, I think about other families who may not have the access, and what are their kids not getting then? And then I also think about if it's maybe a program where you don't have to do it, but it's open to kids, it could also defray some of the costs, is that some of these kids would be bringing their own Chromebooks into class for second, third, and fourth grade next year, and the district wouldn't be necessarily having to purchase or lease as many for the classrooms.
Yep, and so these are all important pieces to weigh and consider together. I also, here's an unknown, right, which this expansion would let us answer. And it's a cart before the horse. So I send my students, I'm flipping the classroom, my students are doing that Zern lesson at home. But is that out of necessity? Because I can't be accessing those resources here in school, right? So if I had that 12 Chromebooks in my room, I could have half my class be doing something with Zern, that flip lesson, while I'm working with the others in small groups, and then they flip, right? And I could accomplish that. And so the question is, how much Zern work is assigned at home when out of necessity? Because it's hard to be able to get enough devices to work with my students, because I'm sharing this very small set of limited devices, one device for every 5 kids. Yeah. So, and we won't know. We won't know until we remove the barrier as well. Any others? I'm going to leave this up here, because after this slide is, Ava went and tacked on her slide. It's the wonder of Google Docs, right? She just said, can I just add a couple of slides to yours? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. So the tacked on slides, I guess, are to address the Keystone exam requirements update.
I specifically wanted to get a visual on where we are in terms of our Keystone exams. I thought I was. Can everyone hear me now? I wanted to make sure that it's been so confusing with a number of different movements in terms of when and how Keystones are administered, and also when they will count for graduation. And I just wanted to do a brief update. In June of this year, the Pennsylvania Senate floated a bill called Senate Bill 880 that was passed 49-0, calling for the delay, a 2-year moratorium of Keystone exams for graduation. And that would amend the Keystone for graduation for students graduating in 2017 to students graduating in 2019. I think under the leadership of Principal Schultz, with my full support and Dr. Wheeler's full support, we decided that based on that vote, it would be best for us to slow down with our project-based assessments. Project-based assessments happen after students do not show themselves to be proficient. We did so because they take a long, long time and require students to do a lot of work. And we weren't sure that they would be required, and we knew that if it turned out that they did need them, we would have the opportunity. And there have been a number of questions about those opportunities for project-based assessments for students in the class of 2017. Very recently, as late as last week, the House has now passed Senate Bill 880, again unanimously, to delay Keystones for graduation until 2019. There was a slight amendment. That amendment included asking the Pennsylvania Department of Education to have specific action steps, particularly around alternative assessments and supporting project-based assessments in terms of expediting them for evaluation. It also includes an amendment that would not deny a student the opportunity for vocational education based on remediation courses through project-based assessment. So having said all of that, the next step is for the bill to go back to the House with amendments. Once that bill is approved a second time around by the Senate, it will go to the governor for signature. So we do anticipate that if all goes well, that Keystones will become a graduation requirement for the class, now the class of 2019, which is this year's freshman class.
Probably it's not our hope that it will be a requirement. We're hoping that things will continue to change in the state and that it will be eliminated. And that's my opinion. I think it's, at least they're delaying it and they're looking at other options. I think it's totally a bad idea. They cannot require the Keystones to be a graduation requirement, especially, working at Eastern, for so many years. I know what will happen to the programs at Eastern if Keystone's a requirement. And that's detrimental to Eastern, and those children could end up dropping out of our high school if they don't have that opportunity. And there's so many other reasons that I think the Senate and the House will eventually wake up and look at alternative assessments in terms of what districts can do for graduation requirements. Just my opinion.
Another logistical problem that we've been hearing about is with the project-based assessments, sending those in to be scored. They're estimating a backlog that will just increase incrementally, and they will not be able to score those in a time frame that will provide feedback. Plus, as you mentioned, what would happen with students' ability to go to Eastern, and we certainly want to increase that. So it's hoping that common sense prevails, and this eventually will lead to elimination of the Keystones as a graduation requirement. But some progress has been made. We can celebrate that.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, I think that concludes the discussion of our motions, and the next thing on the agenda will be community input. So anyone that would like to speak, please try to keep your remarks to about 4 minutes. We're not going to be quite as strict as we are in the legislative meeting, but we'd like to keep things moving.
Jill Florin Drescher. Oh, you hear me? I just had a question regarding the whole detracking motion. I know we've been talking a lot about the track 3 moving to track 2. I'm just interested in knowing what's going to happen as far as the track 2 to honors, because what I see happening is a group of kids that maybe were going to go into track 2, and now parents and students deciding they're going to go into honors. Are we going to have extra classes for that? Are we going to have a lot more kids in the honors program in a class versus expanding more sections? So I'm just interested in hearing about the upper level plans as well. Thank you.
Anita Brister, Fort Washington. So first, I'll start on a positive. Dr. Resnick, I really want to commend you for your question. How will we show success? And I'm just going to say what I would like to see for showing success, or something I would like added to the list, and that would be I'd like the district to survey parents, and I'd like the district to consider surveying teachers again at the end after it's been implemented for at least a year. Because you're leaving out the major stakeholders, and that's the parents. And many of you know, and actually Dr. Resnick and I would have had the same experience, part of why I had some concerns about this, and I still do, is because my kids experienced the tracking. And many of their friends were in different tracks and were quite fine about it. And the kids I'm talking about all went to college. These are not kids that were shortchanged. They didn't have terrible teachers. They weren't feeling, bad about themselves. I have the advantage of distance now that these kids are out of college and they're successful people. I also have concerns because flexible grouping is a lot harder than it sounds. I've done it when I was a young teacher many years ago, and it's hard. I brought up at a previous meeting last month about class size, and I do feel the board kind of blew me off. I'm going to bring it up again. I asked for class size information over the summer after it was clear that the board was going in a detracking direction. I was concerned, and still am, that the numbers I was looking at are high, in my opinion. I'm talking about high school class sizes, numbers in a range of 26 to 30. I've been told at last month's meeting, don't worry about it because the detracking is going to help lower the class sizes. What I would say is I'm not a very trusting person, and I would ask the board, as the schedules come together for next year, if you really want this to be successful, take a look at those class sizes. Don't leave it to chance that the class sizes are going down. Take a look at them. And if you really want class sizes of 28, 29, and 30, I guess that's up to you. I think you're also going to need to take a look at the support teachers. There's no way to know right now if you will have enough. 2 full-time equivalents, don't know if it's enough. I want to say a couple words on the racial discrimination complaint. Obviously, I wasn't part of that group. I heard that the group met for 8 years. I wasn't part of it because I'm not a concerned African-American parent and was never invited to be part of it. What I want to say is, if it's accurate, what's reported in the paper, and it's been in not only the Gazette but the Enquirer, that administrators promised detracking to those parents, and it was promised before the issue was ever brought to the wider group of stakeholders, because it was brought to the wider group of stakeholders in April of 2014. If that's accurate, that administrators promised detracking to a special interest group, they have a right to be a special interest group. We had pool parents, we have sports parents. What's not right, in my mind, is it's completely inappropriate to make such a promise. And it's certainly not the way to improve communication, and it's certainly not the way to build trust. You have to bring issues, and actually the more controversial the issue, the more important it is to bring it public and let the wider group of stakeholders understand the concerns and have a discussion of both sides. So I have a big concern that's a little different than probably the African American parents, and that is, why do we have administrators, it was definitely plural, that are making promises in a backroom committee? That is not the way to run a public school district. I'm very disappointed that it was done that way. And I think everybody knows that with the exceptions of personnel and negotiations, things should be discussed in public. And good communication begins with transparency. So if you, as a board, are committed to good communication, you need to take a look, regardless of where this complaint goes, you need to take a look at your practices of why you allowed that. Why did you allow this committee to have administrators making promises without stakeholder input? If you want to make promises, make them on television. Make them at public meetings. Make them where the reporter's in the room. So I'm stating the obvious here, that I'm recommending going forward, whatever the issues are, you use the most transparent public process that you can. And if you want to give me 30 more seconds, I'll say that I
It's been
have...
over 5, actually.
Yeah,
so.
well, I'm going to take 30 more seconds, Sarah. I've had discussions with Dr. Wheeler, so she knows exactly where I'm coming from on this. I want to be really clear about the next little group of the committee that's going to start tomorrow night, the task force that's going to look at possible realignment or whatever we're looking at. I asked Dr. Wheeler to try to, let's make that come to the public as soon as we possibly can. And she has definitely stated that she will be giving monthly updates, because I don't want to be part of a process that's not a public process, especially when it's controversial. There's parents that are almost in a near panic thinking that their elementary school could be no longer an elementary school. And I don't blame them. They bought a house down the street from a particular school and they think, hey, it might not be that school anymore. So I think let's take that committee and make it come public as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Tanya Cologne, Fort Washington. Just a couple of issues. I think it was last meeting, I'm not too sure, but the tests coming home policy, I think someone, I'm not sure if it was Ms. Hester, asked Mrs. Morrison about our tests and quizzes coming home, or the teachers sending them home. The answer is no. And I've had to write several emails to teachers to just please send home the quiz or test. It's not a chapter test, it's not a midterm or final. These are basic quiz and tests that are not coming home. So I just wanted to say, no, that's not happening. But, if that was happening, parents at home can have a little bit of a better communication with their child and help, because I would like to look at tests in my home, in the privacy of my home, and help my child as well. Also, for the record, I don't know why math is being delayed. Math and science go together with detracking. And I don't care what color you are, but if you're in track 3, we already know our own data that shows the results of the kids for Keystone in track 3, and 70 kids, that's a problem. And what we have now is that with math and science going together as it stands, if I want to take chemistry, because let's not deem these kids and say, oh, track 3 kids, they don't want to take chemistry, because they do. But if they're in track 3 math and chemistry is required for them to have algebra 2, or if we're going to eliminate track 3 chemistry, because we're going to eventually get to science, then you're going to have a gap there that needs to be fixed. And the easiest way to fix that, especially if we're mentioning of the Keystone delayed here by 2 years, is to go ahead and put that in. I mean, it saddens me to hear some of these stories. If these students can come back and say, I hold the district accountable because I had to now take a class before getting into college because I was in this low-track math that didn't really give me the full fundamentals that I should have had, then that's a big problem that we have. So I ask that you do look, take the time. You already have your own information. And math and science, I cannot stress, go together. So you have to do both and not delay what really needs to be addressed. And there is a difference. There's a difference between class, which is like if I have algebra and I have geometry, versus the tracks. So you don't need 3 tracks of algebra 1. Ridiculous. 2 tracks is enough. Lastly, I would like to say with the initiatives, technology initiatives, and I would like to know how much of classroom time are the teachers using for a lot of the web-based, or I don't really know the name, but technology practices that are being used. And what's going on, because I know there was an issue recently that was brought to light within the calculus class where there was some, because of this tech, or I don't know, some kind of web-based program that was being used, there was a kid or something using racial slurs that came through passwords. And my thing is, if we're going to have a lot of these web-based programs in school, then we need to make sure that it's safe, it's being monitored, the teachers know what they're doing, the students are not being victims, and that when something does come about, it's being talked about, because it's very offensive to go through something like that or hear something like that. And that's another, that's a communication piece. So I thank you, but those are my concerns here. Thank you.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. I just want to say I have 3 children in the elementary school. One is also in 2nd grade, and they use Zern a lot. They have it for homework, and the teacher loves it. She thinks it's the best thing to help with Eureka and understanding Eureka. My one concern is I can't necessarily see what my son's homework is. Like, he can go on and while he's doing his thing, but once he's out of it, I can't really see what he accomplished in it. He's just, okay, I'm done. So I don't know if there's a better way for a parent to just kind of monitor what the homework actually is. And it goes for 4th grade too, and it's fine. But as soon as, at some age level, they're going to need some help and it's not going to be fun. So, and then also it brings up a concern that if he's being required to do homework at home, he probably should have, it should be easy for people who can't or don't have that access to get that access, because that's I think where there's like a equity in education, socioeconomic kind of divide that could very easily happen there. So that's a concern. And then just not as big as a lot of these other problems, but if we're going to pay for students to go to a festival, which is really nice, can we just get some clubs back in the elementary level? I mean, honestly. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess we shall try to answer the various concerns. Mrs. Morrison, do you want to address the issue of people moving from track 2 to honors and class size versus increasing the number of sections?
We are putting together our program of studies for 9th grade. And as we move forward into 2 levels with board approval, we are developing a very clear description of what an academic course looks like and what an honors course looks like in 9th grade. We're also developing a very robust data set for students moving from 8th to 9th grade, so that when teachers make recommendations, it's based on a number of different assessments, PSSA data, potentially some PVOS growth data, so that when parents and students see that recommendation, it shows a very clear picture of how the student did in 8th grade and how they might do in 9th grade. I think there may be some movement into honors, but I'm not necessarily convinced that there has to be. I think our academic course is going to be rigorous, standards-based, and challenge students, and our honors course will be as well. And I think that the decision for placement should be between the parent, the student, and the teacher. And so I think that we would have to see those numbers before we can predict them. And I believe that our teachers will do a very good job maintaining the integrity and rigor of that course. So definitely looking at enrollment trends will be important as a follow-up as we measure, and that's probably another measure that I omitted from mentioning when that question was asked. I would hope that the motivation to place a student by parent, teacher, and the student, him or herself, would be really based on the data of achievement in 8th grade, the student's desire, and the conversation between the student, the parent, and the teacher, so that the placement is not just to avoid being in a certain level, but to be in the level that fits the needs of the student.
I guess there are a number of other things if you want to address some of the other issues also. Mrs. Colon, we were actually talking about the test return protocol earlier today, and I just want to stress, if there is a current problem where a test or a quiz is not being returned as per the protocol, if you would please contact first, of course, the teacher. I know you would always do that, and then the building administrator, so we have a clear record, because the directive is to follow the test return protocol. So if we don't hear from, I mean, it's really good to hear from it
about this from you, but we also need to hear through the building administrator that in fact there are teachers who are not following that protocol. Mathematics and tracking, you're right, there's a correlation between achievement in science and in mathematics. At the high school, we have 2 levels of algebra, not 3. We have a level 3 and a level 2 algebra 1 course. There's a requirement for some science courses, but once those students have completed the courses, they are eligible. We do need to have a considerate look at mathematics, but I still will stand by a new program, and until we really live into that program and work through restructuring in 9th grade this year and 10th grade next year, I think that in order to do it all well, I would like to do it in a sequential way. But I appreciate your experience around that. In terms of feedback at the end of the Zern lesson, I think that is a great point, and I appreciate it, and I'll see if we can find some information for parents. In terms of homework at home, the teachers who are flipping using Zern have built-in arrangements that if you're a student who couldn't get to it, and I'm very sensitive to the fact, like in our family, we don't have enough devices for everyone to be on, especially not the young children at all times. So there's some sharing, that there is a very easy way that teachers are providing for when students come in during morning time as teachers are doing, as students are doing all kinds of different things. Oh, you didn't get to do Zern, here, you get to do it right now. So to make sure that there is no lack of access. And so that is built into, any teacher who's currently flipping has that built into her plan to make sure that everyone has access before the actual lesson is taught.
Shall I jump in? As far as clubs, speak with your building administrator. That would have to be something that would be included in the building proposal for budget for next year, because we're doing budgeting a little bit differently these days, and we are involving the building principals and all of the other budget writers in making recommendations. So that would be a recommendation that should come from the building. Mrs. Brister, thank you for mentioning that the task force will meet tomorrow night for our organizational meeting. This will be public. I'm very pleased to share that we had over 60 members of our community volunteer to sit on that task force. Most of the folks who participated in the first task force, if you would, they indicated that they would like to return, so they did, and we ended up having a need for several parents from the middle school, parents from one of our elementary schools, and then we opened up several slots for the general public. I'm happy to say that because we had so many people indicate an interest, Mrs. Brister and Mrs. Place joined me in my office, and we ended up actually pulling names at random. We thought that was the most appropriate way to do that. So our thanks to everyone who volunteered, and if folks whose name was not selected, they're more than welcome to come and join us at the meeting, and we will have monthly updates on the work of that task force.
Will there be a specific place on the website where that information will be available?
Yes, there will, and I will do a monthly update at the legislative meeting as well.
Will it be obvious on the homepage what the agendas are before the meeting? And
we will have a link to the task force, and we'll have a page where we will have agendas and any reports. For example, our agenda for tomorrow evening is Mrs. Place is going to give an overview of what brought us to where we are now and a review of the research that was conducted. Mrs. Brister is going to do an update on the findings and recommendations of the last task force, and sort of as our jumping off point. So we have a list of topics set up over the next several months. Paul Leonard has agreed to join us one evening to talk about residential development in the district. We are going to be reviewing the most current enrollment projections. We're going to be looking at the engineering study, and we're going to be looking at current use of the buildings. And I anticipate having 1 or 2 topics for each month, and our goal is that by May we will be able to have a community forum and share with the community what the recommendations are of the task force. What else?
I can report, I just checked, and the agenda is posted.
It's posted.
On the calendar with a link. So it is available to anyone in the community who wants to see it before the meeting and to use that as a basis for deciding if they want to attend.
Was there anything else specifically
see,
that you want me to address? We've done this.
Class size.
Mrs. Cologne had a question about technology.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
How much
But
time is
that's
being...
really-
Mr. Veed, can you answer that?
Let me address it. So, but she can't see me, so I'm going to stand up. That's okay. So the use of technology varies class to class, subject by subject, grade level by grade level, and lesson by lesson, right? So there'll be some days where a lesson is technology rich, other days where it's not, or the technology is supporting something that is happening in the class. There was an incident that, well, let me backtrack. The tools that we provide, the training that we provide, the platforms we recommend are vetted rigorously by us. All that being said, kids make mistakes. And we had an incident where a student abused our acceptable use policy, caused disruption to a class, resulted in hurting and offending a lot of kids, and we took disciplinary action. The systems we had in place allowed us to identify what had happened very quickly. And then while we are addressing that as a community, I will be revisiting best practices with all the faculty. We, at the same time, with respect to any other particulars, right, with all children, we protect the privacy, right, of sort of the discipline that had happened. But it's not a situation that's done either, right? So it's still a situation that's in process, both for that teacher, for that classroom community, for the students involved, for the administration. And it's an important opportunity for us to put in place systems that are both proactive, right, and a protocol that is reactive. What do we do when this kind of thing happens, right? Because 99.99% of it is wonderful, and there's that small piece that is sad. Kids making mistakes that end up impacting a lot of people.
With regard to Mrs. Brister's discussion about transparency, I really think we have talked about things that have happened in the past, and there's really no answer from my point of view to that right now. What I feel and what I believe, if I could speak for the administration and the board, is that we are all committed to going forward to do things in as community-based and transparent a way as each topic warrants. And I am sure we will hear from people in the public if we do not. But, I mean, that's my approach, and I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything about that. I think we're making an effort.
Is it on? Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I am not certain that the allegations that were made in the newspaper were necessarily true. I think that I was not present when the negotiations or conversations were going on, and I think that a good number of the other people here may not have been present. So I can't necessarily say they're true. I don't think that we should necessarily assume that they're true.
Let's see. Another one of the comments had to do with how we show success for the restructuring, and the suggestion from Mrs. Brister was to include surveys of parents and teachers after about a year. And I don't know if there's any comments about that. I don't know if that's something we want to consider, look at it at the time. I mean, I think the answer is we're going to take it under consideration. Okay. Did we miss anything else? Anything that...
I have one more question that we missed. It's probably the one you have marked now. There was a question about the digital divide.
I addressed that question.
Well, I don't,
Mrs. Kuznets, I think I discussed how teachers who are currently flipping at the elementary level have provisions for students who were unable to get screen time the night before to make sure that they have the ability to access the materials before the actual lesson.
I'm looking at it more globally in terms of the digital divide and what have we accomplished over the past year, be it Comcast or another provider in terms of getting service to some of our families that currently don't have it.
So the work that we did this summer certainly impacted some families with respect to helping them close that gap and having that home connectivity. There have been a number of families that have also reached out specifically to extend their appreciation to the district for providing that device access in the home and making that available. I think this comes back to Ms. Rothman's question, though, earlier in our discussion about the expansion in the elementaries, that if we have that balanced device access in elementary, then that's a space where that takes some of that pressure off of what's happening at home, because I can be doing that at school. So at least moving forward for next year, I think that's a balanced approach because right now, currently, we do have this burden at school where we don't have enough devices to meet the needs of that program. And part of the solution is, well, Zern is really built to allow that flipping. It can happen flipping in the classroom. It can happen flipping at home. But it is a strain for some families.
And yeah, to be fair, we much of that outreach to get connectivity and devices at home for student families that need them was driven by the Chromebook initiative for 5 through 12, not for below that. So there probably is more need remaining at the lower grade levels. I also want to comment on Mrs. Kuznets' comment that it's difficult to see what her son's homework is after he's done with it. That is also a problem in the upper grades for some of the Google Classroom-driven activities, because some activities used to happen on paper and the student, or in a planner or something, and the parents could see that and make sure all the homework got done, and it's harder for them to see that now. We know that's a great example of the sort of thing we've learned in these first 3 months that we know we need to improve upon. We know Google is working on improving some of that for the classroom stuff, right, Phil?
Google's working on a parent portal for classroom. But for now, my recommendation always to families, and I think this would, as we gear up later in the spring to do more cyber cafes that are parent-oriented, is really to sit down with your kid. And so do Zern with them. Go through the lesson. It's really quite fabulous when you see how it's all scaffolded. But then for all students, log in as your kid into their Google Apps. Go into their Google Drive, go into their classroom, see what's happening, see the assignments, look at the feedback that your teachers are providing for the kids. I think that's just, there's no parent portal will take the place. It's the digital equivalent of opening your kid's binder and taking a look at how they do their work and the quality of the work that they're doing.
Right.
Another comment that I believe it was Ms. Florin who discussed level 2 moving to honors. I think that's a good thing. We need to encourage that for students, for children who we think can be successful. I'm not sure where we are compared to other districts in terms of how large a population we have for honors, but if this results in a group of students moving up, I see that as a win for us, and they're successful. So again, we will look at the numbers. When the students register, we'll see we may need more honors classes, or we may need, we'll be shuffling the numbers and the types of classes when we see the enrollment.
Did we answer everyone's? Okay, any Closing comments from anyone? In that case, thank you all and have a good evening.